The sky above the ruined planet was a strange, pale green, streaked with clouds that shimmered like thin silver threads. Broken towers and shattered walls marked the landscape where a once great civilization had fallen. Dust rose in small spirals from the cracked ground, carried by faint, restless winds. Among the ruins, a lone figure moved carefully. She was tall, strong, and graceful, yet there was a weariness in her steps that told the story of loss and hardship. Her name was Lyra, a warrior princess whose world had been destroyed by war. Her people had been scattered, her family gone, and the lands she had known as home were nothing more than ash and rubble. She had survived battles and betrayals, yet the loneliness that now weighed on her was heavier than any sword she had carried. Every day was a struggle, every night a reminder of what she had lost. Lyra paused on a ridge, looking down at the remnants of a great city. The towers were jagged, broken, and sharp against the sky. She had once stood among them as a leader, her people proud and strong. Now silence ruled. Her heart ached as she remembered the faces of friends and family who had perished in the conflict. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound, metal scraping against rock. She stiffened, instincts on alert. Few dared venture into this dangerous land, and even fewer humans had been seen here. Lyra's people had always been cautious around strangers, and her own experiences had taught her that caution could mean life or death. From a nearby ridge, a small craft landed with a controlled thrum of engines. The dust swirled as the ship's legs touched the ground and a human stepped out. He was tall, lean, and carried himself with careful confidence. Unlike most aliens Lyra had encountered, he did not rush or make loud displays of power. His movements were deliberate, as though every step had a purpose. Lyra watched him silently, hidden behind the remnants of a collapsed wall. She did not approach, but curiosity pulled her closer. Humans were rare on this planet, and she had heard stories of their courage, though she had never seen it firsthand. There was something about this human, calm, careful, and yet alert, that drew her attention. The human moved among the ruins with a strange respect. He did not touch or disturb the fragile structures. Instead, he studied them, jotting notes into a small device. Lyra tilted her head, impressed by his attention to detail. Most beings here would have rushed in recklessly, seeking loot or glory. This one seemed different. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the ground. A wall near Lyra's hiding place cracked further, and rocks tumbled down toward her. She leapt back instinctively, but the ground beneath her gave way. Lyra found herself falling into a hidden crevice, trapped by fallen debris. Pain shot through her leg and she groaned, realizing she could not free herself alone. Panic rose, but Lyra forced herself to stay calm. She was a warrior, trained to face danger. Yet for the first time in years she felt a pang of fear. She was alone and no one from her people would come. The thought was unbearable. The human who had been observing the area heard the crash. Without hesitation, he approached the crevice, assessing the situation. His voice, calm and steady, called out, "Are you okay down there?" Lyra's eyes narrowed. She did not trust easily, but she answered, "I am trapped. I need help." The human paused, looking at the debris. Then, without a second thought, he began clearing rocks from the crevice. His hands were careful but strong, moving stones and metal fragments with precision. Lyra watched, surprised by his bravery. Many would have stayed back, fearing the unstable ruins. Minutes passed and sweat ran down the human's face. He worked tirelessly, speaking softly to keep her calm. "Almost there. Just hold on," he said. Finally, he lifted the last heavy slab, and Lyra pushed herself free. Her leg ached, but she was alive. For a moment, neither spoke. Lyra studied him. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and kind. He was human, and yet he had risked himself without hesitation. Thank you," Lyra said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I do not usually rely on others. You are different," the human smiled slightly. "Name's Ethan. I help when I can." "You looked like you needed it." Lyra nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She had not felt safe around anyone in a long time, not since her family had fallen. Yet here was a human, offering her aid without expectation or demand. They moved together through the ruins, Lyra leaning on Ethan for support. She felt a mix of pride and surprise at her own trust. She had survived countless battles alone, and yet now, she was grateful for this stranger's presence. As they traveled, Ethan pointed out dangers that Lyra had overlooked. A collapsing wall here, a hidden pit there. He moved with precision, thinking ahead, and his calm voice guided her safely. Lyra, used to leading and fighting alone, realized she was learning from him. He was teaching her not just to survive, but to consider options carefully, to anticipate danger. Night fell, and the ruins glowed under the strange green sky. Lyra and Ethan found shelter in a partially collapsed tower, its walls still standing enough to provide safety. They sat opposite each other, sharing a quiet meal from supplies Ethan had carried. "I do not understand humans fully," Lyra admitted, "but I see courage in ways I did not expect." "You are remarkable," Ethan shrugged. "I just do what I can. You're strong too. You survived far longer than most would have here." Lyra's eyes softened. She had never been praised like this. Most had either feared her or judged her. Ethan's words carried no arrogance, no superiority, only respect. It was strange and comforting. As the night deepened, Lyra felt exhaustion weigh on her. She had been running, fighting, and surviving for so long. For the first time, she allowed herself a moment of peace. Ethan noticed and offered her a blanket, a small gesture that seemed extraordinary in a world of ruin. "Rest," he said simply. "We'll face tomorrow when it comes." Lyra nodded, letting herself lean against the wall. She was not used to depending on anyone, yet somehow she did not fear it. For the first time in years, she felt the faint stirrings of hope. The night was quiet except for the wind whispering through the ruins. Lyra's mind wandered back to her people, to the battles and betrayals, and to the future she had never imagined. Now, with Ethan by her side, perhaps survival did not have to mean loneliness. Perhaps there could be more. Trust, companionship, and maybe something deeper she had long thought impossible. In the darkness, Lyra made a silent promise to herself. She would survive not just because she was strong, but because now she was not entirely alone. And as she looked at the human who had risked himself to save her, she realized something she had not expected, the beginning of a bond that might change everything. The first part of their journey had ended with survival, but a new story was beginning, one that would test courage, challenge hearts, and show that even in a broken world, humans could shine in ways no alien had seen before. And so, under the pale green sky of a shattered planet, Lyra and Ethan sat quietly, two strangers brought together by fate, ready to face the dangers ahead. It was the start of a journey neither of them fully understood yet, but one that would change both of their lives forever. The pale green sky of the war-torn planet still hung over the ruins, but a new day had arrived. Lyra stretched her stiff muscles and flexed her aching leg. Ethan had been careful with her injuries, using supplies from his pack to bandage the cuts and bruises. The pain remained, but the human's presence made it easier to bear. She had expected to wake alone, fighting her demons silently, but now she was not alone. "Can you walk?" Ethan asked, offering his hand. His eyes were calm, yet alert. He scanned the ruined city around them as he spoke, noting unstable walls and hidden dangers. Lyra took his hand, surprised at the strength and steadiness in his grip. "Yes, slowly." They moved together through the crumbling streets, stepping over twisted metal and fractured stone. The ruins were deceptive. What appeared solid could collapse with the slightest pressure. Lyra's instincts guided her, but Ethan's careful observation helped them avoid the deadliest spots. "Watch the floor there," he said softly, pointing to a cracked section of stone. "It looks solid, but it could give way." Lyra nodded, impressed. Humans were often underestimated by her kind, and yet this one had knowledge and judgment that rivaled the best alien scouts she had known. She realized something important. Survival here required more than strength. It required intelligence, careful thought, and courage. Ethan had all three in abundance. As they walked, Lyra felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. The ruins no longer felt like a prison, but a landscape that could be navigated safely with the right guidance. She found herself watching Ethan carefully, noting the way he observed, planned, and acted without hesitation. There was something comforting in knowing that he could face danger without panic, yet he remained humble about his skills. Suddenly, a loud screech echoed across the city. Lyra froze, hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of her blade. From the shadows, a pack of predator creatures emerged. They were sleek, four-legged beings with sharp claws and glowing eyes. They had clearly been drawn by movement and sound. "Stay behind me," Ethan said calmly, drawing a small energy pistol. He did not hesitate, but he did not rush either. His movements were precise, measured. Lyra was momentarily struck by his composure. The creatures circled them, low growls vibrating through the air. Lyra's warrior instinct screamed to attack immediately, but she waited, watching Ethan. With a quiet command, he fired, not to kill but to frighten and confuse them. The creatures hissed, stumbled, and scattered, but not before one leapt toward Lyra. Lyra met it with a swift strike of her blade. The creature fell, and she glanced at Ethan. He nodded once, satisfied that she was unharmed. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the warmth of relief, not just survival. She was not alone in this fight. They continued their journey, now more aware of the dangers lurking in the ruins. Lyra asked questions, curious about Ethan's background. "Where do you come from?" she asked, keeping her voice quiet. "Earth," he said simply. "We send explorers to study planets." "I'm here to observe ruins, life signs, and strange energy readings," Lyra nodded. She had heard of Earth, of humans, but she had never interacted with one so directly. "And you risk your life for others? Even strangers?" Ethan shrugged. "I help when I can. Some things are worth more than personal safety." Lyra considered his words. She had always lived by strength and duty, but Ethan's perspective was different. Courage, he showed, could be paired with kindness and empathy. It was a lesson she had almost forgotten in the wake of loss and war. Hours passed as they moved through the ruins. The sun's pale light cast long shadows over broken walls and shattered statues. Lyra began to talk, hesitantly at first, about her past, the war, her people, and the family she had lost. Ethan listened quietly, never interrupting or judging. "My people. They were proud," Lyra said, voice tinged with sorrow. "We believed strength and honor mattered above all. But now nothing remains. Only ruins." Ethan nodded slowly. "Loss is hard, but surviving it makes you stronger. And sometimes it helps to have someone by your side." Lyra glanced at him, struck by the simplicity and truth of his words. She had never allowed herself to rely on anyone. Trust had been a weakness she could not afford. Yet with Ethan she felt a small spark of something she had not felt in years. Hope. Their journey led them to a narrow canyon. The path was treacherous, with jagged rocks forming sharp edges along the way. Lyra moved carefully, but even with her experience, the risk was high. Ethan stayed close, offering guidance and support. "Step here," he said, pointing to a stable rock. "It will hold your weight." Lyra followed his instructions, amazed at his intuition. He seemed to understand the terrain instinctively, predicting dangers before they appeared. She began to see humans not just as fragile beings, but as adaptable and clever, qualities that could rival any warrior she knew. As night approached, they found shelter in a partially collapsed tower, similar to the one from the previous night. Lyra tended to her wounds while Ethan arranged their supplies. The ruins were dangerous, but she began to feel safer with him nearby. "I do not understand why you risk so much for strangers," she said, her voice quiet. Ethan looked at her, calm and steady. "Because some things are worth it. Courage isn't just fighting battles. It's protecting others, helping when you can, and doing what is right." Lyra considered his words. Her people had taught her courage, but it had always been tied to pride and duty. Ethan's courage was different. It was rooted in empathy and choice. It was human, and it made her think differently about strength and survival. Night fell, and the green sky darkened, stars faintly visible beyond the clouds. Lyra and Ethan sat near the tower's edge, sharing a quiet meal. She found herself watching him, noticing the careful way he handled food, the way he kept watch even while eating. He was alert, yet relaxed, cautious, yet confident. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to speak freely about her fears and regrets. She told him of her mistakes, the battles she had lost, and the people she had failed to protect. Ethan listened, never judging, never dismissing her pain. "You have survived more than most could endure," he said softly. "That makes you stronger than you realize." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest she had not felt for years. Most beings she had met either feared her or sought to exploit her strength. Ethan treated her as an equal, acknowledging both her pain and her strength. As they settled in for the night, Lyra felt a strange calm. She had learned to fight, to survive, and to endure, but she had almost forgotten the value of trust and companionship. With Ethan, she began to remember that even in a broken world, there could be hope, connection, and understanding. Before sleep took her, Lyra glanced at Ethan. His eyes reflected the faint glow of the ruined city below, calm and steady even in the midst of chaos. She realized something she had not expected. She felt safe with him, not just physically but emotionally. And as she closed her eyes, the weight of grief seemed a little lighter. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the possibility of something more than survival. She felt the possibility of trust, partnership, and perhaps even a bond stronger than any weapon or armor. The journey ahead would be dangerous. The ruins held threats, and the warlords who had destroyed her world were still out there. Yet Lyra no longer faced it alone. With Ethan by her side, she felt a small spark of hope that together they could navigate the dangers, confront the enemies, and maybe, just maybe, find a new beginning. In the quiet of the ruined tower, the warrior princess and the human explorer sat together, two beings from different worlds connected by circumstance and growing respect. It was the start of a bond that neither fully understood yet, but one that would shape the challenges and triumphs to come. The sun would rise again, and with it, new trials. But Lyra felt ready. For the first time in years, she was not just surviving, she was learning to trust, to hope, and to accept that even in a shattered world, courage, compassion, and partnership could change everything. And so, under the strange green sky, the two of them rested, unaware that their journey had only just begun. The ruins around them were dangerous, unpredictable, and lonely, yet with each other they could face the coming days with strength and courage. The dawn broke with a faint green glow over the ruins, painting jagged towers and broken streets in soft, eerie light. Lyra stretched carefully, still feeling soreness in her leg from the previous day's struggles. But the pain was secondary now. Her mind was full of thoughts about the human, Ethan, who had become her companion and guide. They moved cautiously through the city remnants, alert for predators or hostile survivors. Each step was a test, but together, they moved with a rhythm neither had known before. Lyra noticed how Ethan thought ahead, predicting dangers and finding safer paths often before she even spotted the threats. Humans, she realized, were clever in ways that aliens rarely appreciated. Strength and courage were important, yes, but intelligence, planning, and adaptability, these were equally powerful tools. "Watch out," Ethan said, halting suddenly. He crouched beside a shattered wall, pointing to a series of jagged stones that formed a hidden trap. Lyra leaned closer, examining the hazard. It was subtle, easy to miss, but deadly if misstepped. "You see things I sometimes miss," she said softly, a hint of admiration in her voice. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's not just seeing. It's thinking ahead. You've got the strength, I've got the planning. Together we cover more ground safely." Lyra considered this. She had always relied on her strength, her combat skills, and her instincts. But here, with Ethan, she saw the power of combining strengths, blending human ingenuity with alien experience. It was reassuring. Hours later, they came across a narrow canyon, its walls twisted and sharp. A strong wind gusted through it, carrying the scent of dust and danger. As they moved carefully, a sudden noise echoed above them. Rocks tumbled down from the canyon walls. Lyra acted instinctively, pushing Ethan out of the path of falling debris. A large boulder grazed her shoulder, leaving a painful cut, but she did not cry out. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said, eyes wide with concern. He knelt beside her, examining the wound. "I couldn't let you be hit," she replied simply. "I owe you more than my life already." Ethan shook his head. "It's not about owing. You would have done the same for me." That's what matters. Lyra was struck by the simplicity and honesty in his words. Humans had a different kind of courage than her people. It was not about honor or pride, it was about choice. They acted because it was right, not because they were forced or expected to. As night approached, they found a partially intact building to use as shelter. Inside, the air was cool and still, a rare comfort in the dangerous ruins. Lyra cleaned her wound with water from her pack, while Ethan prepared a small area for rest. "You do a lot for others," Lyra said quietly as she wrapped her shoulder. "Even for strangers, why?" Ethan considered the question. "Because it's the right thing to do. Courage isn't just fighting, it's protecting, helping, and caring. You humans have a saying, 'Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.' I try to live by that even when it's hard." Lyra nodded slowly. She had heard of humans' moral teachings, but seeing them in action was different. Here was a being willing to risk his life repeatedly, not for glory, but out of principle and care. She felt a strange pull in her chest, something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Trust and perhaps even admiration. The next day, as they continued, signs of other life appeared. Tracks in the dust hinted at survivors, aliens who had escaped the war but were now desperate, dangerous, and likely hostile. Lyra tensed. Her instincts told her to prepare for battle, to strike first if necessary. But Ethan held her arm gently. "Wait," he said. "Observe first. Sometimes knowledge is better than speed. If we understand them, we can avoid unnecessary conflict." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. She followed his lead, realizing that humans' way of thinking, combining caution with action, was sometimes more effective than pure aggression. Hours later, they were spotted by a small group of alien survivors. At first, the group seemed ready to attack, but Ethan raised his hands in peace and spoke carefully. Lyra watched as he communicated, slowly building understanding and trust. By the time the sun dipped low, they had gained a temporary truce, the survivors agreeing to share the shelter with them for the night. Lyra marveled at Ethan's skills. Where her instincts demanded confrontation, his reasoning created alliances. She felt her respect for him growing, mixed with something warmer, deeper. That night, while the others slept, Lyra and Ethan sat near the tower's edge, watching the green sky darken. Silence stretched between them, comfortable yet filled with unspoken thoughts. "You make things seem possible," Lyra admitted quietly. "Even in this broken world." Ethan glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the faint light. "We make possibilities together. Alone we survive. Together we can thrive," her heart skipped. These were not words of duty or obligation, but of choice and trust. Lyra felt a bond forming, fragile yet undeniable. She had been broken for so long, but here was someone who did not see her as weak, nor did he demand she hide her pain. Their bond grew stronger in the days that followed. Danger was constant, predators, rogue factions, and treacherous terrain, but they faced it side by side. Ethan's quick thinking and resourcefulness saved them more than once, while Lyra's combat skills protected them from threats the human could not handle alone. They complemented each other and the partnership deepened. One evening, as they sat around a small fire in a cave, Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I have been alone for so long. I thought I would never trust anyone again. But you make it easier." Ethan looked at her, his expression soft. "Trust is earned, not given lightly. You trusted me. That says more about you than me." Lyra's chest tightened. She had always relied on herself, guarding her heart. Yet here was someone she could rely on, not just for survival, but for guidance, companionship, and understanding. The next day brought their greatest challenge yet. A larger group of hostile aliens appeared, intent on claiming the ruins for themselves. Lyra prepared for battle, instinct sharp, but Ethan stopped her. "Not yet," he said. "We can outsmart them. We don't have to fight blindly." Together they set traps using knowledge of the terrain and ruins. Lyra watched as Ethan moved with precision, combining strategy and foresight to create an advantage. When the battle finally came, it was swift and decisive. The enemies were outmaneuvered, forced to retreat. After the skirmish, Lyra studied Ethan. He was not a warrior by alien standards. He did not have enhanced strength or combat training, but his mind, courage, and heart had turned the tide. For the first time, she saw that humans could achieve greatness in ways that were not measured by raw power. As night fell, Lyra allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had lost everything, family, people, home, but she had found something unexpected: connection, respect, and the possibility of hope. Sitting beside Ethan, she realized that her feelings were no longer just gratitude. They had grown into something deeper, something she had long thought impossible. She was drawn to him not just as a companion, but as someone she could rely on completely, someone who inspired courage, trust, and a faint hope for the future. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. She pictured a world where she was not alone, where she could face challenges without the crushing weight of despair. And she pictured Ethan at her side. As the stars shone faintly above the green sky, Lyra made a silent promise to herself. She would not hide her feelings, nor would she deny the bond growing between them. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with unknowns, but she was ready to face it, not just as a warrior, but as someone willing to trust, to connect, and perhaps to love. The ruins around them were dangerous, the threats constant and the world broken. Yet with Ethan by her side, Lyra began to see that hope could exist even in darkness. Humanity in its courage, ingenuity, and compassion. had brought light to her world when all else had been lost. And so, under the pale green sky, the warrior princess and the human explorer continued their journey. Each step was a test, each challenge an opportunity, and each moment together strengthened a bond neither fully understood yet. The story of survival had shifted into something more profound, a story of partnership, courage, and the quiet beginnings of love. The green-tinged dawn broke across the ruined planet, casting long shadows over broken towers and shattered streets. Lyra stood at the edge of a high cliff, looking down at the remnants of the city she had once called home. Her chest felt tight, her heart heavy with memories of loss, but also light with something she had not felt in years. Hope. Ethan stood beside her, calm and steady as ever. His presence had become a constant in her life, a reminder that even in the most broken worlds, humanity could shine. They had survived storms, predators, and hostile aliens together. Each danger had strengthened their bond, proving to Lyra that humans were not only clever and courageous but also capable of loyalty and compassion beyond measure. "Do you think it will ever be safe here?" Lyra asked softly, her gaze fixed on the ruins below. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Safe, maybe not. But survivable, yes. And together we can make it stronger than before." Lyra's eyes lingered on him. She had always been cautious, mistrusting others. Yet with Ethan, that caution had slowly melted away. She trusted him completely, her thoughts, her heart, even her fears. He had become more than a companion. He had become someone she could rely on, someone who had brought light into the darkness of her life. Their attention shifted suddenly as a shadow passed over the cliff. Lyra instinctively raised her blade while Ethan prepared his weapon. A squad of hostile aliens emerged from the ruins below, their numbers larger than any they had faced before. These were survivors of the warlords who had destroyed Lyra's world, determined to claim the ruins and eliminate anyone in their way. "We can't fight them head-on," Ethan said quickly, scanning the terrain. "We'll need strategy. We need to make them underestimate us." Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they quickly assessed the area. Broken walls, jagged rocks, and narrow paths could be used to their advantage. They began setting traps, arranging obstacles, and preparing a path that would channel the attackers into controlled zones. Lyra marveled at Ethan's thinking. He was not trained in alien combat, yet his mind worked like a seasoned strategist. As the hostile group advanced, Lyra took her place behind a barricade, ready to strike if needed. Ethan moved beside her, calm and observant. When the first aliens stepped into the trap, they were met with well-timed collapses, unexpected barriers, and clever diversions. Panic and confusion spread through their ranks, giving Lyra and Ethan the upper hand. But the enemy was relentless. They adapted quickly, regrouping and pressing forward. Lyra's blade clashed with theirs, her warrior instincts cutting through their ranks, while Ethan provided guidance, calculated attacks, and distractions. Together they fought like a single unit, their trust in each other evident in every move. Amid the chaos, one of the enemy leaders spotted Lyra and moved to strike her. Without hesitation, Ethan intervened, throwing himself between her and the attacker. His weapon struck true, stopping the alien in its tracks. Lyra's heart pounded as she realized the depth of his loyalty. Humans were fragile compared to her kind, yet he had placed himself in danger without thought for his own life. "You don't have to protect me," Lyra shouted over the noise, her blade striking another attacker. "I choose to," Ethan replied simply, eyes steady. "I'm not leaving your side." For Lyra, that moment crystallized everything she had been feeling. She had trusted many warriors, many allies, but none had ever shown such selfless courage. Here was a human who faced danger not for glory, not for duty, but because he cared. Her heart swelled with a mix of admiration, respect, and something deeper she could no longer deny. The battle raged until the last of the attackers fled, retreating into the ruins, beaten and disoriented. Lyra and Ethan stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily, covered in dust and sweat, but victorious. The danger had been immense, yet together they had overcome it. As the adrenaline faded, Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice quieter now. "You could have left at any point. You could have stayed safe. But you didn't. You chose to fight with me. For me." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't think of it as choice. I thought of it as what's right. You trust me. I trust you. That's enough." Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes. She had spent so long being broken, mistrusting, and alone. But now, standing here with him, she realized something important. She did not have to face the world alone anymore. And she had made a decision, one she could not ignore. I choose you, she said finally, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Not just as an ally, as my mate. Ethan blinked, momentarily surprised, then smiled softly. I choose you too, Lyra. The words hung between them, simple yet profound. In a world broken by war and loss, they had found each other. Trust, courage, and compassion had brought them together, and now their bond was complete. The following days were quieter, but no less important. Lyra and Ethan worked to secure the ruins, turning the broken city into a place that could provide refuge for survivors. They taught others how to combine strength, strategy, and careful thinking. Lyra's warrior skills and Ethan's human ingenuity created a new model of defense and cooperation, inspiring hope among the displaced aliens who joined them. Even in the midst of rebuilding, their bond deepened. Lyra began to see that love was not weakness. Trust was not a liability. Together they were stronger than any one of them alone. Each night they shared stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and quiet moments of companionship. The ruins, once a symbol of loss, became a symbol of hope. One evening, as the green sky darkened and stars appeared faintly above, Lyra and Ethan stood on the cliff again. The city below was still broken, but it was alive with cautious optimism. Survivors moved carefully, rebuilding homes, tending to wounds, and learning from the humans and alien warriors who guided them. You've changed this place, Lyra said softly, looking at Ethan. Not just with your ideas, but with your heart. Ethan shrugged. It wasn't me alone. You helped too. Strength, courage, and hope, you brought all of it. I just added a little planning. Lyra smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. She realized that humans and aliens could achieve extraordinary things together. Courage, ingenuity, and compassion were not bound by species. They were universal. I never thought I could trust anyone again, Lyra admitted, her voice quiet. But with you, I feel like I can face anything. Ethan took her hand gently. And you will. Together. The wind stirred around them, carrying the faint scent of dust, metal, and new beginnings. Lyra tightened her grip on Ethan's hand, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years. They were not just survivors. They were partners, allies, and now, mates in every sense of the word. As the stars grew brighter, they watched the ruins below, seeing not destruction, but the potential for renewal. Lyra knew the world would remain dangerous, that challenges were far from over. But she also knew that with Ethan by her side, she could face any threat. Humans had proven themselves courageous, clever and compassionate, and together, they had reshaped her broken world. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future filled with hope, partnership, and even happiness. She had been desperate and broken, but she had chosen wisely. Ethan was not only her protector and companion, he was her mate, her equal, and the one who had restored her faith in life. The journey ahead would not be easy. They would face predators, hostile aliens, and the remnants of the warlords who had destroyed her people, but they would face it together. Lyra had learned that courage could be found in many forms, in strength, in strategy, and in the heart. And she had found it most powerfully in a human who had risked everything to be by her side. As the night settled over the city, the ruins became quiet, a fragile calm resting over the landscape. Lyra and Ethan stood together looking at the stars, feeling the promise of new beginnings. They had survived the worst, found trust and companionship, and chosen each other in a world that had once offered nothing but despair. And in that quiet, under the pale green sky of a broken world, Lyra felt whole again. She had been desperate, she had been broken, but she had chosen, and in choosing she had discovered strength, hope, and love beyond measure. Together they would face whatever the stars sent their way. Together they would rebuild, protect, and inspire. And together, they would prove that even in the darkest times, courage, compassion, and the human spirit could change worlds.